All right. Welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered Fridays on the Consistency Corner podcast. I'm really pumped today for my conversation with my friend Megan Moran, who is back on the show. Megan was on, I don't know, like maybe a year or so ago. We had a conversation. And I'm excited to have her back today to share some updates in her business ventures. She is the founder and owner of the Mompreneur Co studio, which is a podcasting studio for mompreneurs. So I'm really excited to hear about that. But then we're also going to talk about, with her studio, the power of getting away to get things done, which as a mom, I think might sound like a dream for many of us, but it might also sound like there's no way. How could I possibly do that? So we're going to talk about how it's been a really magical experience for her clients and how she was inspired to open the studio and give women that space. So Megan, welcome back. Welcome to the show. Give us an update. Tell us what's been going on in your business lately.
Well, thank you for having me back. I'm so excited for us to get to chit chat and catch up and all of the things. I too don't remember exactly the last time we talked because we talk more often than just the last recording. But I'm assuming with you, yes, it was probably a year ago. So a lot has changed from this time a year ago to now. I feel like I have changed so much in a really great way, and a lot of growth has happened. So, nuts and bolts of it, what is different? Back then, we were a completely virtual business. We were helping mompreneurs between our podcasts. We were starting to write a book, and we're considering a TV show around this topic. And we're doing a lot of like retreats and connection and all of that to help mompreneurs on their journey. And we talked a lot about visibility and authority building too. It has all culminated since then, beginning of 2023. That's the year we're in right now, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I just never even know. I started to feel this inkling and this call that we wanted a space of our own. We had hosted some retreats. We had gone in person again. My business prior to this business for over 10 years was being a personal stylist in our area. So a completely local business. And I was really craving the merging of these two worlds. And so had this inkling of we need a space. And in true me fashion, shortly thereafter, we had one. My husband, Colin, who's a co-founder in this business, said, if we're going to have a space, I just think it needs to be specific. And out of nowhere, the words blurted out of my mouth of, well, then it needs to be a podcast studio. And so that's what we set out to do. End of April, we got the keys to this space. I thought by May we would be able to launch it and we can all laugh. Why did I think I could renovate an 1,800 square foot place in 1 month? With 2 kids,
Right. That's a
what?
totally realistic goal.
Right. This is how I think in my head because I see the vision on Pinterest and I know it's going to happen. And I think just ordering the furniture is it. So in August, we launched and opened the place. And it's been so fun to get to see this culmination of community and connection that we created online, tapping back into our old roots of how do we actually leverage local marketing and use local. And we've actually made our podcast local for this season. So that's been fun to play with as well. To further our business along and how does that help us actually grow quicker. And then we've been helping people one-on-one specifically with our batching days, either helping them launch a podcast. So in one day, we get one VIP day, we get their entire podcast up and running and their whole season 1 ready to go. And then the other thing we've been doing are these founder experience. Again, one whole day where we sit down with a founder, my photographic artist and I, and we have a self-discovery retreat meets like a mastermind brainstorming session. And we just lean into who you are as a founder and map out so much more that you can do and really help you feel confident in articulating what you do. But the biggest thing that I've seen from a business owner and mom perspective, from a podcast host, and from, serving my clients and what's working from them is this having a quiet, creative, collaborative space to go to where the kids aren't knocking on the door or you're hearing them and pausing what you're doing. But also having that dedicated time to just knock it out and get stuff done and stay in creative flow.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that so much. And I love what you're saying about the collaborative and dedicated time to brainstorm with someone. Because when we're in the day to day of our business and answering the emails, doing the things, writing the content, supporting clients, making decisions, it can actually be really lonely. And so having that person to connect with that can hold space for you and help you think through those things. I can only imagine that is so powerful, right?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, this conversation. So Bianca is my photographic artist that I work with, and she's a dear friend. And we've really uncovered a lot in this too that we apply both with the podcasting and with the founder experience of it is helpful, especially as a solopreneur, to have someone who can reflect back to you. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the key there, is the reflection, because what we've seen a lot, and maybe you can relate to this too, Ruthie, is the online coaching sphere has gotten a little out of hand. And there's a lot of this, like, you're amazing and you do this thing, but to really succeed, you need me. And that is where we have personally, both of us have fallen into that trap and pattern time and time again. And so it's like, what if it's not a but what if it's a and? There might be an opportunity for space to be held for you. There
Mm-hmm.
might be an opportunity for us to reflect back. And I think that it's just been interesting, and something that's top of mind with us is like, we want to be that space when someone feels called to needing that, but not
Mm-hmm.
the fear mongering of, without us, without space, without support, you can't do what you are born to do, you know?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that so much because to your point, we see that fear mongering so much and it's gross and it feels disgusting. And then we start to like beat ourselves up and feel like we're not good enough because we're hearing it from all these different angles. And I so appreciate that there is starting to be a shift in the online space where people are more like, it's not about your fears, it's about your desires. Like, let's talk about what you want and how I can help you get there. Or that like reflection and coaching versus the like telling and like, if you don't do it my way and follow steps 1 through 10, like you're going to fail and what's wrong with you. But that, and let's just call it what it is, like the bro marketing, it's, it's loud. It's really loud.
Mm-hmm.
And so those of us who are more transparent, who are willing to share the behind the scenes, who are willing to like shine a light on the flops along with the successes, were overshadowed, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think there's, like you said, there's a lot of noise. And so then there's a lot of like, you go from instinct and what feels good to you to like questioning yourself,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
questioning the questioning, and it just becomes this nasty spiral, especially when you're inundated on social or wherever else you show up with, this is the right thing and this is the right thing. And for a lot of overachiever, high achievers, or recovering perfectionists like me, it's like, I see point A and I see point Z. I know my vision, I know where I want to go. And so I kept outsourcing my power of, I know A, I know Z. Hi, can you help me get there? Tell me my roadmap to get there. Because that's
Mhm.
how we're being marketed to, right? Is like, you want to do this and this is where you want to be. And I have your answer. I have your secret sauce. When in
Mhm.
reality, it's everybody has their own secret sauce, right? Like, the blueprint is within inside me. I do need, I'm not saying there's no need for coaching. I think there are people who in their zone of genius can help reflect and say like, well, what if it's this? Or where's your limiting belief on that? Or what if that dream thing that you believe is truly possible? And so it can be so hard when you like feel an intuitive gut, or you feel like an instinctual, like, this is what I should be doing. Should. Mhm. But then you keep hearing these outside questions of like, but this is the way, but this is the way, but this is the way, instead of
Yeah.
what's your
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. And for so many of us, you know, we consume all the podcasts, we download all the courses, we sign up for the bundles, we get the emails, and then it becomes so overwhelming that you have like analysis paralysis of like, what am I even supposed to do next?
Yeah.
And without that other human to have a conversation with and process and work through, like you just keep spinning your wheels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You just get stuck in a loop, right?
Yeah. I'm curious, do you know your human design type?
I'm a manifesting generator, and then I think all of the arrows go to the right except for one or something like that. I
Yeah.
forget
Well,
all the things.
that's funny. A manifesting generator, for those of you who are not familiar with human design, manifesting generator, they have an incredible amount of energy and they have a lot of ideas, which Megan definitely does. But they also, this is something that I've been leaning into and trying to understand in this space because I'm a generator. And a manifesting generator can often, because of their energy, can skip steps. And I'm a generator, and a lot of the mentors that I follow are manifesting generators. And I have to sometimes remind myself, like, your type is different. Your
Mm,
type is meant to consistently keep taking steps and doing the work, and you can't skip it the way they do. And that doesn't make you wrong. It doesn't make you
yeah.
bad. It's just you're different. And so I think even in the like mentorship space, it's important to find people who are in alignment with your type if you're into woo-woo stuff like human
Mhm.
design, because then you can learn from somebody and be reflected by from somebody who is more similar to you.
Yeah, I'm working with a client right now in launching her podcast, and it's all about reframing neurodiversity. And the point that I love about what you're saying is like, we are all different. And for so long, we've been in an industrialized situation. Our conditioning and everything has been made to tell us that being different is not best, right?
Mhm.
When in reality, we know it is. And so I think about that a lot when I listen to what she has to say as we're working on her podcast and everything of like, that's the magic. That is the secret sauce. And so
Mhm.
when you can find people who understand that, the other thing that I've been thinking about too, and Bianca and I have leaned into a lot, is like that more yoga approach. Like when you think about when you're in a yoga class, you were just doing yoga this morning. Didn't I see that on your
Yeah.
stories? Okay.
Yeah.
So you'll relate to this of like, you know how the yoga teacher asks you, like, you might want to do this, or you might do this, or this might feel good to you. Like, I think that's so powerful, like the power of suggestion, the power of reflection, because we all are different. So how can we think that there's a one size fits all? It's just how it gets reflected back, and then how you choose to act with it, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I thought of this analogy the other day. I'm like the queen of analogies.
I love it.
And I was thinking about marketing strategy and business strategy and how like everybody's like, well, what's the right strategy? Or is this strategy going to work? Well, there's hundreds of right strategies, just like there's hundreds of chocolate chip cookie recipes. Like you go to Pinterest and you type in chocolate chip cookie recipes, you have recipes for days.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all kind of similar in that they have somewhat of the same ingredients, but there could be a difference here, a difference there, and temperature and the way you bake it and what you want the outcome to be. And I think marketing strategies and business strategies are the same way. Like it's a framework and there's 100 different variations. And you have to find the framework that tastes good to you. And it might not taste good to somebody else, but that doesn't mean it's wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's such a smart analogy too, because we love a good story, right? Something that we can like lock into and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, my husband is not as big of a fan of my analogies. He's like, "Oh my god, you and your analogies." But like that's just how my brain works, so it's
Yeah,
fine.
not another one, but yes, another one.
Yes. Well, I'm curious with your evolutions and pivots because that's something that I think when people start out in the online business space or as an entrepreneur that they're like, "Okay, I'm starting this thing and I have to follow it through to the end and like I don't even know what's going to happen in 10 years, but I'm marching towards this goal." And then when they start to like think about maybe a different direction or a pivot, it can be really scary.
Mhm.
So, walk me through some of your pivots and like who held space for you to reflect on those things and feel confident to actually take those next steps.
Mhm. Hmm. How much time do you have on all my pivots,
Right.
girlfriend? Like, there's been a lot. Let's just take the first biggest one, right? Leaving a business behind after 10 years that was doing well because it didn't feel right for me anymore. And I think that biggest pivot there was learning to follow what feels good, to follow my intuition, um, and to be really intentional because yeah, I could have kept doing that business. I could have kept showing up. I could have kept making the money and pushing through, but like who was I really serving in that if I did that? And so in that time frame, I think honestly, it felt more like a matter of the things I was consuming, what was holding space for me. Certainly, I'm sure my husband, I mean, it's been 3 or so years since then, so my mom brain doesn't quite remember, but I'm sure he was really encouraging too, saying like, "You gotta go after." But I think at the end of the day, it was a lot of me and my conviction. I've
Mhm.
noticed that a lot, that is like a shift And that is when we got into this space. Once we had the idea for it, I just had like a conviction around it. And I shared it with this time around, I shared it with only people closest to me because I didn't want any outside influence because I had such conviction around it, which is really interesting. And I would say now, a year later, basically, I would do that even differently now because I have like just a stronger sense of myself and like, it's everybody has their own opinion and that's all valid. And like, I'm doing what's right for me. So I
Yeah.
definitely think that evolution of my personal strength has
Mhm.
changed over time. Also because I've put the reps in and I've pivoted like a gajillion times. And so I just learned to like trust it more and more.
Yes, I love that what you said about putting the reps in because you have taken the steps. You've taken action and you've taken action and you've taken action and you've reflected on that action of not only but like what were the results, but how did I feel? So talk to me a little bit about that because I think a lot of high achieving women don't take time to do that reflection and quite honestly for many of us don't take time to feel the feelings. So talk to me a little bit about that process, that reflection process for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think awareness is just so key. Um, one of my like biggest values, my number one thing is like choice and that we have unlimited choices. And even when you aren't making a choice, you are making a choice.
Mhm.
And I think pairing that with this phrase that I've been saying a lot lately, which is it true? So example, not quite analogy, but story. My kids, so I have a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old. And sometimes my son will be like, oh, this is happening, or you never do this, or whatever, typical toddler stuff. And my response back lately has been like, is that true? And he'll be like, well, no. And I've noticed doing it to myself, even when I've got like, stuff swirling in my own head, or I'll hear people around me. And I'm just more aware now of how I'm talking to myself and how I'm interacting with my day to day. And really, truthfully, what that all is like abundance versus scarcity, right? It's if
Mhm.
you've read Gap in the Gain or 10x is easier than 2x, it's all of this concept of like, where is my mindset living? And what is that narrative that I'm playing in my head? And so I think a lot of my pivot and change has been in that growth of awareness and that questioning of like truth and choice.
Yeah. Yeah, I could imagine that is that true would also work very well with my 8-year-old when he says
Yes.
like, I never get anything."
Hmm.
Is that true?
Yeah. And
I
I
don't
think
think
like
so.
the more so we're leaning into a lot of different things over here, one of which is slow living. And I've just noticed even that, like me just slowing down, even in some moments with an overachiever, high achiever. And this it goes back to the question of like, how do we start to have more awareness and listen? When I'm feeling frantic or rushing, I try not to rush anymore. I have a lot of things off of my calendar. I have very limited time for certain things. It changes the way that I, run my business, etc. But in moments when I feel frazzled, I start to just say slow, slow, slow. And so even when I'm talking with my kids now, like, and they're having their big toddler feelings, I'm saying like, is it true? Like, very compassionate and slow, and like it's just interesting how I've seen everything shift. And also, this took like a lot of deconditioning to do too, from the rat race, right?
Yeah, and that's something interesting, the deconditioning, because I think this narrative around personal development and growth mindset and the self-help world, many of us like we consume the books like crazy. We read them, we read them, we read them, we read them. But then we don't feel any different. And it's because we're not actually taking the time to slow down, implement, reflect. We can't just keep consuming and expect there to be a change, right?
100%. Yeah. And I think that's when you are an entrepreneur, you have this interesting ability to put into action quickly if
Mhm.
you are aware. Again, like anytime I am doing certain research or listening to a new thing, like the golden nuggets that I pick up are those mic drop moments. First off, I can't stop talking about them. And then I tell everybody about my new ahas until they eventually become so integrated in a part of me that I just do them without needing to explain where they came from. Um, but yeah, I think that's the cool thing is like it's kind of project-based learning, only the project is our lives and our
Yes,
livelihood all the time.
yes. Oh my gosh. I Love that so much. So let's talk a little bit about the podcast studio and
Yeah.
people creating space to get away to get it done, because I think that also is that like giving yourself the opportunity for reflection. Even though you think you're going to like produce and do a thing, you're also giving yourself time to probably produce a better thing because you have the space to
Yeah.
reflect. So share with me a little bit about like what the experience has been like for some of your clients.
Yeah, it's been so fun. So before they even get into the studio, we take an hour to 2 hours to sit down and just map out their show. And I find so much juiciness and goodness in that because we're asking the deeper and I don't want to say better questions, but like we're asking the better questions, right?
Mhm.
We're asking like things that not everybody thinks about. You just get excited, you have an idea, and you take action. I'm all about messy action, but I'm also very much about depth and like impact. And this, I view podcasting is this form of legacy. I'm sure you can relate to that. Like it's about more than just a marketing channel to get in leads. And that's honestly something we tell our clients. Like when we have potential clients come in, there are podcast studios that are focused on getting you as many downloads and getting you money through ads and sponsorships. We have a different approach. Our clients are typically mompreneurs, and so they have their own business. So that's going to be the way that they would make money is by sharing what they do, not by trying to make ad sales. But before we even get to that point of having that conversation, we talk about that you have to have a podcast and be doing this podcast because you love it so much that you will do it whether you make money or not, because of the legacy, because of the deeper impact. And I think starting there, when somebody has said yes to that, it just fuels you and makes such a big difference in everything that you're doing, again, because you're slowing down to then speed up, to then have a
Yes.
more cohesive first season and have guests that are more aligned and have conversations that feel even better. So that's the first thing that I see like making a major impact. I was talking in a group and one of the women had already started a podcast, but I was sharing these questions that I share with clients, and it was already transforming the way that she would now look back at her podcast. And so I think
Mhm.
that depth might not always be there at the beginning because it's traded off for the rush of getting it done.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting what you said about, what is the intent of the podcast? What are you hoping to achieve with the podcast? And I think we can think about that with almost any type of content is what is the job of this content container?
Yeah.
What is your podcast's job? Like for me, it's nurturing my ideal client and my community. And quite honestly, and I'll be like transparent about it. I use my podcast and bring on guests that I want to have conversations with. I use
100%.
it to like build my network, and
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. I'm not using it, to your point, to grow to a billion downloads so that I can sell ads for Athletic Greens. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
it's okay for people who do
Right.
that. That's fine if that's the job of your podcast. But then
Mm-hmm.
I think about this too with social media, because people do get so overwhelmed with social media and the metrics that we're supposed to be looking at, that like, if you're looking at a specific metric, does that metric measure the job that you want your podcast to do? Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that's where we talk with our clients a lot too about that focus. And I'll ask that question of like, what is actually the metric? What does success look like for this podcast? Because we might be misaligned in that. And if we are, that's totally cool. We're just not your space for that. And so
Mhm.
connection is our number one marker. How are your listeners feeling? How many
Mhm.
connections are you making, like you said, Ruthie, with the people that you want to be connecting with? That is our focus. That is our number one metric, because even if you have 100, 200 downloads an episode and it feels like want, maybe it does. Maybe it's, those are 100 to 200 people that you're connecting with, like that
Yeah.
have you intimately in their ear. And so connection is definitely like, I think the biggest metric. I don't really care what your listener score is or what top percent you are. If you're not making an impact and serving people, one person, 10 people, 10,000 people, what's the point?
Yeah. And when we get into that, like really speaking to our ideal client or our ideal community and that niche, you're not going to be competing with like the Bobby Bones show, because you're not talking to a huge audience of people. And again, that's okay. And it can be really interesting when you're influenced from people outside the entrepreneur space or outside even like the podcasting space. Like when I started my podcast, I remember we were like 3, 4 months in. And like a friend of ours was like, how's your podcast going? Are you like really making a lot of money from that? I was like, nope, not a cent. Like,
Nope,
that's not
that's
what
not the
it's
point.
for. But people don't know, and they don't know
Yeah.
what they don't know. And so when
Right.
you're getting started, and even as you're growing and evolving, you don't know what you don't know, which is one of the reasons I love that you do host retreats and events, because you allow people to get in the room with other people who do know, or other people who are curious enough to ask questions,
Mhm.
so that we can all learn from each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the beauty, right? When you get into a space, like it's not even just learning from the people, it's also again learning from the reps. Like when our clients come in and they have everything mapped out, they feel confident, they feel ready to go, they're lit up by the mission of their show and that it's actually happening, it's coming into real life. And then they sit down behind the mic. And sometimes it's their first time getting behind a mic or presenting in the sense ever. And sometimes it's their 100th time. And everybody, time and time again, has to record their 30-second intro over 10 times
Yeah.
because the stuff comes up, right? Like we can give you all the strategy all day long, but at the end of the day, the mindset stuff's going to come up and you have to battle that and put in the reps and start to have the awareness and have the conversation. And that's the cool thing in the space is like we can do that. And I can be here to say like, coach you as a host to host, like here's what we could do and here's what's different and here's what I hear and here's something else to think about. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of interesting different things that come when you are in a collaborative and safe space. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, again, reflecting back to yourself, it's you working through your stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, you were saying, talking about putting in the reps, and it made me think about going back to some pivots and evolutions. So, you get your Facebook memories every day
Mhm.
if you're a Facebook person. And, I started my business in network marketing
Okay.
and was doing health and fitness coaching. And I go back and I look at my stories where I'm like talking to the camera and I'm talking to you about this and I'm talking to you about that. And I realized that practice of putting in those reps set me up for success to be able to be a podcast host, to
Mhm.
be able to talk on a call with a potential client and not be nervous, to present in, some sort of mastermind or coaching program. And I've had people tell me like, "Oh my gosh, you have so much great energy and you show up so well on camera." And it's like, well, it's because I did it for 3 or 4 years and got nothing out of it. I just
Mhm.
kept doing it. And then you
Mhm.
got better at it, right?
Yeah. Well, and I would say probably it wasn't that you got nothing out of it.
Right.
It's every time you learned a little something new, right? And then those
Yes.
breadcrumbs brought you to where you are now. And yeah, I totally relate to that. I mean, growing up, I'm a third generation mompreneur, family of entrepreneurs. And my mom would sell her gourmet food products at like shows like retail holiday markets, things like that. And so it took me a long time to realize like why am I so comfortable speaking all the time. And it's because I did that spiel for 8 hours a day at, 10 years old again and again. And so by the time I got to college, like speech class was easy because I've stood in front and said the things over and over. And
Yes.
I don't discount that there is definitely some like innate what lights you up and what you're good at there. But yeah, it's definitely the what how can we learn from ourselves each time through so that we see the gain and see the evolution of ourselves.
Yeah, I know. I tell my son all the time, and like as an 8-year-old, he's struggling with this. Like, if I'm not good at something right away, I don't want to do it. And it's
Mm,
like, if you're not good at it right away, it doesn't mean you're never going to be good at it. You have to be bad at something in the beginning to
mm,
get good at it. And he's so sweet. I was telling him, we were talking about learning, and I'm trying to teach him about growth mindset. And I said, if something is really easy in school, it means that you're not really learning, because when
mm,
it's harder, your brain is working to learn new things. And, already like they're comparing themselves to other people just like we as adults do. And he's like, well, so and so little girl, she must not learn anything because everything is easy for her. And I'm like, "Yeah, but how often do we as adults do the same thing? We listen to someone else's podcast. We look at it on the internet. We look at somebody else's website. And we're like, oh, it's so easy for them. It's so easy for everybody else. And that's not true.
mhm,
Everybody goes through the process of putting in the reps.
yeah. Yeah, and I struggle with the word of hard like hard work. I'm trying to rewrite that narrative for myself because it's like, does it have to be hard?
Mhm.
Or we're very focused on like passion-led learning and like going deep when we're interested, because we can go so much deeper when we, are into something. And so what we're really focusing on with our kids, I'm curious if you've noticed this as well in your own journey and with your kids too, is like, how do we love the process?
Mm.
Like, yes, we want to find something that we're interested in and we're passionate about. And that makes learning a lot easier because you just like go down those rabbit holes and you just can't stop. And you're like
Mhm.
eating up information and implementing it and all that stuff. But where's that inflection point of, I just love to learn, or I love this process of having an idea and uncovering information about it and then putting it into action? I don't have an answer. I'm still trying to learn, especially through deconditioning, that myself. But that's something my husband and I talk about a lot. Like when the kids want
Yeah.
something and we say they can start a business to do it and they just want the end goal to get the toy, how do we find something where they love it along the way so that they keep putting the reps in, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting. And, like talking about the deconditioning, like we were taught to chase an outcome. We were taught to chase a result and achieve. And so the
Mm-hmm.
process doesn't feel productive because there's no result there. And I know I like will coach to that too, of like, let's focus on the process. Let's celebrate your consistency. Let's celebrate taking the steps. It doesn't matter what the progress is. The progress will come over time. And in that deconditioning space, I was talking to my son about, he was showing me a spelling test and he got an A on one and he got a D on the other one. And I was like, listen, I need you to hear this from me right now. And like, I know you don't understand, but like, you need to hear this from me. Like, and I like started to get choked up and I was like, mommy loves you, whether you got an A or a D. I love you the same. And he like looked at me and he was like, so I can just get D's? And I was like, I love you the same. And I said, I want you to do your best and I want you to try. But like explaining that was challenging because as kids, I mean, for me anyway, it was like you were praised when you got A's. You were praised when you achieved the things. And that's something that I'm certainly working through, of like that deconditioning and then reparenting and then trying to parent him differently
Mm-hmm.
around like, I want you to find things that light you up. I want you to spend your energy differently. I want you to be a kind human. But
Yeah.
no, that doesn't mean you can like not do your homework
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
not.
Well, in that 10X is easier than 2X book. Have you read it yet?
No, I listened to an interview with the author, but I haven't read it yet.
Okay. So what really, I think it was in that book. Once I read that, then I listened to a couple of the other ones that they have. Point being, I loved, oh no, maybe it was Gap in the Gain, which they mention in this book. The point is, they mention how we're typically always comparing ourselves to the outside. What's the
Mhm.
achievement? What's the ideal situation? What's that vision from A to Z, like I mentioned before? And so every time, not only does that ideal continue to change as we pivot what we want and we feel into the next thing and all the things, but we're also comparing to this ever moving mark. And so instead, it's not about comparing forward, it's about comparing yourself to you backward. And that to me, like
Mm.
there was something about how they said it and like me visually in my head being like, oh, so when I look back on videos of myself in business from 10 years ago, and I'm like, sometimes when you have that hindsight, you're like, dang, in that moment, I thought that I was like, oh, I could have done this better, or I pivoted after that because I didn't think it was that good. And now you look back and you're like, I was actually doing well. Look at me. Like that was pretty good. And
Mhm.
and so that's, I think, like part of the loving the process of like gamifying almost yourself. Like, how can I be better the next time? Or how can I grow? Maybe it's not always even better. Maybe it's that you failed, but you learned something. Like, how can I get curious about what's that next step that's going to happen and how I'm
Mhm.
going to evolve because of it, not for any other thing, like any other outside achievement. That just like clicked in my head when I heard that from them.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. Well, Megan, you and I think we could talk for like hours about this stuff,
Hours.
which fun. I am coming to the Podcasting Moms Conference in Nashville that you will be there. So we'll get
Yay!
to catch up in person and hang out. I'm so excited for that. But I want to wrap up and ask you a couple fun get to know you questions that I love to ask on Unfiltered Fridays. And the first one is about bingeable content. as we do talk about content here on the Consistency Corner. So I would love to know either a show or a book that you were just like cannot get enough of and would recommend.
Oh goodness, the list is long. So I'm going to do like three things. Is that okay? Three things.
Yeah.
Okay, binging Pinterest. I'm all about like slow living, gentle feminine business, all of that. Binging that content like crazy. Reading, I'm reading some different homeschooling books. There's this one woman who wrote Wild and Free and then like Wild and Free Family. So I'm binging that like crazy right now. And then I am a huge Gilmore Girls fan, and I'm on round 15 of watching the season all the way through. So that I'm always constantly binging. You can ask me that in a year, and it will probably be the same answer.
I have never watched it, and I need to because I think I would love it.
You would.
Like, based on
Everybody.
the people I know who like the show, I'm like, then I would totally like the show. Like, I need to add that to my list.
Yeah, and then you come here because we live in the studio is in the Real Life Stars Hollow. So come on over.
So fun. I love it. Okay. So, along with your content binging, I love to know what's your current go to snack.
Oh, well, I am on a health journey right now. So my focus is on protein, and I'm very much a big tea fan. So I don't have a fun one for that. I'm just trying to get as much of my protein in every meal as I can. It's a
Yes.
struggle.
So I don't know if I don't know if I think you're over 40 yet, but
Mhm.
from what I have heard, as I just recently turned 41, like
Okay.
protein is more and more and more important. And I'm like, but I just really want to eat bread and cheese. Like, can I just
Pasta,
eat bread and
please.
cheese, please? So I am
Yeah.
with you, trying to get in more protein for sure.
Mhm. Mhm.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So then, well, you said tea was your go-to beverage because that was my other question. Is it hot tea or iced tea?
Hot tea typically. Yeah, I have like in the morning, we have a tea shop here. So lately I've been drinking a black chocolate tea with a little bit of honey. I also found out recently that part of my bit of weight gain was because I became Pooh Bear because I was putting over a tablespoon of honey in every single tea and having 4 teas a day. And apparently that adds up in a secret hidden on weight that you didn't expect. And then after that, I switched and don't do caffeinated, and I have like a mushroom type of tea that I do. So
That's fun. That's fun. I told somebody, this was a while ago. I was like, I want to be a tea person. I don't know if I'm just not trying the right tea or if I'm just not a tea person.
when you
So I'm still
come,
working on
I'll
finding
take
a
you to
tea
the
that I
tea
like.
shop. Oh, we'll have a field day.
Yes, that sounds fun. All right. And then because we love to always chat about travel as we've chatted about getting away to get things done, I'd love to know either a trip that you took recently that you would recommend or something that you're planning that you're looking forward to.
Ooh, good questions. Because we have little kids, we haven't really traveled much. We did go to Chicago for a wedding and we lived in Chicago. So it was fun. That was our first trip with the kids and we road tripped it, which was 6 hours with the littles. So that was fun. We live by a very nice spot. It's 10 minutes down the road. But there's another spot in Pittsburgh called Nemacolin that I kind of have on my list and radar that like maybe Colin and I'll do for our Christmas is like getaway. It's close enough, but we could go to a high-end spa and get to just chill. So either we'll do the closer one, Walden, or we'll go to Nemacolin.
Yes. Oh my gosh, a 6-hour road trip with two littles. I can only imagine. My
Yeah.
in-laws live like 7 hours away from us, and we did that drive once when my son was somewhere between 1 and 2, and we were like, we're never doing this again.
Never happening again. You can come here. Yeah, we're planning on going. Well, the kids really want to go to Adventure Bay at Mall of America. So Chicago would actually be the halfway point, and they were obsessed with Chicago. So we're thinking about doing it again. So it'd be like 6 hours to Chicago and then 6 hours or 7 hours from Chicago to Mall of America. We're considering it. I'll let you know. We'll check back in.
Yes,
Tell
yes.
you how
Keep
it
us
goes.
updated. Oh my
Mhm.
goodness. Well, Megan, this was such a fun conversation. Let our listeners know if they want to reconnect with you, where they can find you, where you hang out online.
Yeah, you can find us on Instagram, mompreneur_co, or you could head to our website, mompreneurco.com, and you'll find all of our stuff on our blog there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being here. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, thanks for having me, Ruthie.